Take a chill pill, just calm.
Gayatri ma'am, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself.
I went all the way. I think when I started my entrepreneurial journey in 2007, I was about 36 years old. I think you should not put too much pressure on yourself. I've more struggled with who am I, but who defines us, right? Believe that it's possible, and if it's not this route, you'll find some other route.
So, hey guys, so today it's the first of many for me. It's my podcast, my very first podcast, and it's with the one and only Gayatri Vasudevan ma'am. And today we're going to be talking about stuff related to business and upskilling and all of those different fun stuff. So, before we get into anything, I would like to tell you a little bit about Gayatri ma'am. She has been mentioned on the Forbes list for the best social entrepreneur and also as one of the most top influential people in business by Business Today. So, Gayatri ma'am, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and give everybody an idea about who you are and how great you are and all of that stuff.
So I don't know if I'm great, but I can tell you that I'm 53, and I feel I'm like an aging film star.
Yes,
So
definitely.
you think about it like this, right? Who are the two people who who do you think of when you think of an entrepreneur? You always think of a young startup below 30, and here I feel like an aging film star. So I'm 53, and I've done a lot of things which I think I've enjoyed. So my entrepreneurial journey is a bit like that. I was reading the other day that film stars have the most ups and downs in lives. So they have hits and they have misses, and then they have flops, and then they do well and not. So I was just thinking, so similar. In my last 15 years as an entrepreneur, I've seen so many things which have worked, which have not worked. Um, so I think the only thing that I can say which is consistent, and I would say um, I would want other people to know is to one has to get up. So resilience is what I have learned through the last 15 years, and that's the thing which I think is most important for any person who wants to, at any age, be an entrepreneur.
Well, I think, ma'am, I think speaking about an aging film star, you definitely have the grace of a film star, and you seem like uh, you're sort of like the Roger Federer of entrepreneurship, is the way I see it. Very gracefully and very elegantly, you do whatever you're doing, and seeing it firsthand, being an employee for you, I can notice like you just move with that sort of aura, and you have a lot of grace to it. So, I think the first question I would like to ask you is, what were your key mentors when you started out, or who inspired you? And could you tell us a little bit about that?
So I think Mohammad Yunus has always inspired me. Ila bin Butt has been a major inspiration. Aruna Roy, several people who I felt have made significant changes in their lives, in their own lives, in order for them to make larger change happen. I think those are the kind of people who really, really. I still, I'm totally awed by their achievements, by their perseverance, and the belief that change is possible.
And what would you say, sort of, I remember you mentioned the other day, but you had this key moment where you're living, if I'm not wrong, in a village with you
My
just had your
daughter.
daughter then, and that sort of experience really propelled you towards this direction of life. Could you speak a little bit more about that and how that whole experience was?
So I think let me do one thing. Let me go a little bit back in time. When I was
Perfect.
about 19, I decided to intern in a nutrition campaign which was in Purnia. I was completely urban, born and bred, upper middle class family, so not very, quite privileged in that sense. So when I went there, I first realized uh, train schedules, stations, the whole, you get cut off in villages. All of those were things which started hitting me. But I still felt it was a great new experience because I'd never seen sunflower like that. There were like tracts and tracts of sunflower, which was amazing. And everybody was talking politics. You're talking Bihar. So, everybody talks politics.
When
Everybody
is this?
This was 1990. 1990. So around that time. So I was like, it was interesting to see people knew their news, people knew their Dainik Bhaskars, they knew their local, very citizen aware population. And then I think that changed my mind as to what I want to do. And then I came back, and my college had this national NSS, it's called, I think it's even there today, National Social Service. So I said I'll set up a small after school for children in my neighborhood. So there was a Dhobi Ghat on one side, and there was a Kashmiri refugee colony on the other side. And that really opened my eyes because again, I came from the arrogance that I can teach. So then the question really was, they were far more mature than me. So I could teach them English or mathematics, but I could not really relate to the experience, the world experience that they had. And they were little ones. They were, while I was reaching my 20s, they were in the 10 to 12, and they were possibly closer in age, if I call it the world age, than my world age. So that was again a learning experience for me. And post that, I decided to do my social work in Bombay, where I started working with domestic workers, visiting the slums 3 days a week, staying there. And I realized a lot of things that I had taken for granted, I didn't feel at all equipped to deal with. And then was my dream saying, let me go live in a village. So I said, this is it. I'm going to transform a village. I'm going to go there, live there, and make a big change happen. But when I went there, as you said, I had my daughter by then. So I was about 25, and I had a 6-month baby with me. And I had decided to live in the lines. So I lived in a plantation, therefore the huts were called lines. Then very small issues started plaguing me, right? There was no attached bathroom. So it was a common toilet, one had to go outside, and the toilet was outside. There was no gas.
And your
So
daughter
wood
was
stove,
with you
yeah.
when you moved there?
So there was a wood stove, there was no gas. I was like, how do you even cook in a wood stove? So then hand pump, there was no water inside the house, so you have to go and get a water on a pot. So every time I was trying to go and get water in the pot, half the water would fall down. I just didn't have the grace or the hip and the balance in order to carry water and a child. They do it effortlessly. They carry water here, water on their head, and the child. And here I am with one daughter, one pot, half water down. So I think I spent the first few months just in knowing that I didn't have life skills. But today, if you ask any of us, we'll say we'll teach communication life skills to the poor. I think it's a context of what do you mean by life skills, right? To live in our world, you need to talk well, you need to be able to communicate well. But to live everyday life, we don't have the life skills. So I think these were game changers for me in my late teens and early 20s. Then I thought to myself, this is the career I want to do. This is what I want to do for life, right? I really want to learn what I don't know. And therefore, because I don't know it, can I find better solutions for me as well as for them? So that's really the motivation.
So I think, ma'am, looking back, if if I would to summarize or sort of draw a conclusion, you had the vision, which is you went to a village and you were like, I'm going to change this village, I'm going to do all of these different things, and even with when you did the course in your college and build that sort of community, and then when you went to the village, you were taught like life skills and stuff. So in a way, would you be able to say that those two skills sort of made you the entrepreneur that you are today, because you had the vision and you had the self confidence, all of that stuff, and then you also had the like life lessons that you learned through all of the experience?
After that, I spent about a decade at ILO, a little less than a decade, but all the same. When I was at ILO, I also learned the skill set of patience. Change is okay to say, but how does change happen at scale? I learned what bureaucracy does. Um, what is the difference when you say education? How does it happen? Employment, how does it happen? What are the gaps? So while it was taxing, and I'm an action person by nature, so it's like to learn to say, okay, wait, this will happen, but one needs to take other people on board. What does it mean to have all stakeholders on board? How do you do it? But also lessons that I learned. So, I think when I started my entrepreneurial journey in 2007, I was about 36 years old. And I would say it happened. I didn't sign up to be an entrepreneur. It was more like I wanted to do something, and then there was already an existing organization. So I said, let me come and join it. And when I joined it, I realized it had a lot of problems. So I just jumped into it. So it was not like it was not this um, Rani Jhansi moment where I said, I'm going to be the social entrepreneur. I'm going to beat the world. No, it just happened. And then I think over the years, I like the freedom. I like the um, I like the fact that I have the ability to try what I want. Um, that's what really excites me about being an entrepreneur. On the other side, I also enjoy the making people happy. Education makes me happy. Young people make me happy. So I feel even if one, two of them have really made it big, it gives me an enormous kick. So
So I wanted to ask you something even that day, but with Gen Z, we have this term which is called main character energy, which is basically it's like in a movie, there's the main character, and everything revolves around the main character. And a lot of us Gen Zers, like we're all trying to be the main character of our own story. And generally in life, like we all think that we're the main character of our own story. That's just how humans are. Do you think through entrepreneurship that thirst for like the main character energy is quenched, or what is your take on it?
see, it's like this. A first time I've heard of main character, so I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around it. I think I think any entrepreneur should not be the main character. I think an entrepreneur should be someone who is able to ensure the entire team and possibly their customers. Um, and whether you're an entrepreneur on the for-profit side or on the not-for-profit side. So I personally don't see a major difference between the two. I know there is a difference, and at some other point, probably we can talk through that. But in my mind, your ability to listen in and ensure the other person, every person in your entity, organization, company, feels like they are the main character is the most important trait of an entrepreneur. If everything is yours, then it becomes dictatorship. So I think the difference between being dictatorial and being where we are able to listen into the voices of your employees, your customers, your beneficiaries, your stakeholders is very, very critical.
And I can tell you guys that Gayatri ma'am is really good at this, because the whole idea of this podcast itself started from that, where I just pitched her the idea that why don't you do something for your YouTube and could be beneficial for my YouTube. And she listened through it. So, like she said, like passing on the energy to other people and making them feel empowered and all of that stuff is something that ma'am has got on like her checklist like really well. And ma'am, I think if you could get into, like you mentioned, the non-profit and profit organization, what is that like? What is it like running such a big company of this scale and, meeting all the check marks and all of that stuff? Could you tell us a little bit more about that with the
So,
non-profit organization? And
so let me talk of the non-for-profit Sambhav there. See, in a not-for-profit, it's what does it mean? I mean, one doesn't think of entrepreneurship in the context of a not-for-profit, right? But in my mind, it is actually. Because what happens in a not for profit is one should see to it that every intervention that you do needs to move towards sustainability. So one should not look at things saying that, you've got this grant and you have stopped for it. So that means that every single, and it's very difficult. I can tell you that I'm struggling with that. It's not that I've conquered that battle, right? But how do you create sustainability? For example, for us in Sambhav, employability is very big. So if we say that we start skill training centers, how does the center, without grant money, is it possible to even get it to sustainable? What does it mean? Because students will not pay. Candidates, who comes there? Those who believe education is not important, and those who are still searching for themselves. And remember, all of them are Gen Zs. All of them are young people who who are who are first generation learners. So success for them seems like a aspirational income, government job. So you're fighting against the trend. At the same time, what is the skill set they lack? In my mind, is just confidence. If like yesterday, I was in Jaipur and I had this very interesting boy. He was very. They were all sitting in a retail sales associate classroom, very seriously waiting to get their certificates distributed. And then we started talking, and we said, "Listen, let's understand, what do you want to do?" So he said, I want to join the police service. So, but communication is very important in the police service and it's important. So I said, okay, then let's start looking at how retail sales associate as a course was going to help you. And what was interesting is, after we did role plays, we did a whole bunch of fun stuff, really, really fun stuff. And after we did that, he went into the next classroom, and he started talking about what he wants to do as in the course, what he feels he should learn for the remaining 21 days. The interesting thing that he said is, all parents are willing to put money to make their children study, but they're not finding education useful, and therefore he wanted to come here to learn skill sets which were life skill sets for him. So communication, negotiation, leadership were skill sets he wanted to learn. And then I was thinking to myself, this is what our school system is missing. This is what our homes are missing for first generation learners. Who is to give them those leadership skill set? Who is to give them that communication skill set? So, to me, in my 100 centers, if I can make them learn through this technique we call experiential learning, you learn by doing. That means if you are learning sales, you have to sell. There's no option. Go sell anything. I said, go recruit, enroll candidates, take a commission, ask for a commission, sell products, but sell. You cannot not sell and learn the technique of selling, right? And course after course. So if we are starting an EV service technician course, you need to have an EV garage. They need to start practicing on bikes, because the customers are only going to like somebody who's experienced. We did it, I think, quite successfully with beauty. We're seeing every day girls are earning, and you would have seen that
Definitely.
being shared in the group. I think the interesting thing to me is, how do we make people believe that you don't have to learn and then that is the traditional education system? How do you make people earn and learn? And it's not and it's every week of learning. Every week of learning, how do you make them earn because of that? How do you bring the lessons of that earning? What worked, what didn't work? How do you debate those? I think those are the interesting things. So coming back to your point is, in the not for profit, therefore I see the need for entrepreneurial skill sets far, far more than anywhere else, because each and every center, each and every project you take, if you work in schools, how do you create sustainability there? If you work in hospitals, how do you create? So it doesn't matter. For, of course, in our case in Sambhav, everything is related to earning and learning, right? Even when we do schools, we're building toilets, we're putting solar, but we want to bring in more transversal skill sets through this. The idea is not to put solar, but to bring energy audits. That, do children understand energy? Do children understand menstruation? Do children understand financial literacy? How do you bring it early on so that you don't have the Jaipur, young boy situation where at 19 or 20 he's trying to learn transversal skill sets? Can we bring it in younger and therefore streamline it? So, to me, any not for profit needs to think through saying that, who pays after this grantor walks off? And if that payment is going to come through what routes? And if so, how? I think that's very, very important.
I think so. You're really getting into like the specificity of think of as one individual when he gets into one course. What exactly is his whole timeline after that? Is that what you're trying to go at?
So I'm saying it's two things, right? As an institution head, my job is to see that we don't walk out of the community easily, so that the community has access to whatever resources we started creating. For the individual, it is going to be their journey of sustainability, their journey of growth. So that young person between the ages of 12 to 29, it's his or her journey. How are they interested whether the institution survives or not? I mean, there are companies and companies which close down. That doesn't affect us as individuals, right? That affects the company, that affects the entrepreneur. So if an NGO closes down, it won't affect the individual, but it will affect the organization. So as an entrepreneur, I have to balance both, right? I have to see that the organization scales, grows. I have to see each unit there become sustainable. And I have to see that this individual finds value in what I am giving. So that value cannot be, the value should be measurable. Now, if I tell you, Dhruv, I'm going to teach you leadership skills, you better learn the leadership skills. Otherwise, you're not going to value what I'm giving you.
And use it also
Yeah,
directly, which is what you spoke about earning
absolutely.
while learning.
Absolutely.
And what is it like? I'm sure being like a woman in this space and at the level that you are, they come with certain challenges throughout your journey. Could you speak about that a little bit?
That's the one I most struggle with because I think I've had it easy, relatively easy. I didn't have to fight much of a battle at home to do what I wanted. I think I've more struggled with who am I? Am I a not for profit? Am I a for profit? Because I do have Sambhav and I have LabourNet. Both are co founded by me. Um, so I feel my struggle has been more in terms of does the for profit, do I talk the language of the for profit world? While in my mind I do, but I'm not sure the others see it that way. When I say sustainability, does that mean all the business words of EBITDA and profitability and things like that? And therefore, am I talking the same language? Uh, I think I relate more to the not for profit. But having said that, I think the for profit business is very, very important for the success of the not for profit. It's inextricably interlinked, right? Unless LabourNet, which is now handled by a professional team, who you met, Rajesh, Ashish, and Suhail, and Sachin, and all of them. So they need to go out and get more work if we have to do experiential learning and make it happen. So Praveen, Navya, all of them need to do it. And on this side, we've got to see to it that we we have the caliber to deliver to it. Um, so so my challenges, I think I gave you a very roundabout answer, but um as a woman, I think on the for-profit side, I have struggled far more. As an entrepreneur on the for-profit side, I have struggled far more. And I think it's because I'm not able to talk the language that they consider as important. I think that's where my struggle has been. Um, and probably also it's the cool factor, right? There are certain things which, for networking, for example, I mean, I like young people. So I'm not necessarily the person who's able to do the kind of networking I require for business. So I veer towards, you know, doing more operations in that sense because of that, because I enjoy it. So I think those are more the struggles.
And could you tell us a little bit about, you mentioned patience and you said that you started your business later on into your life, right? You started your business journey later on into your life. But what a lot of people in my generation, me in person too, is there's this sort of impatience, like, like abhi karna hai, we have to start now, or we're sort of missing out this FOMO term. Have you heard of the term called FOMO? Yeah. So this FOMO that no, everybody's getting onto it, everybody's doing something. So, how did you deal with that? And another question that I'd like to link with that is, how do you, and is it possible to still have the insane amount of drive that I've seen that you have? You're constantly traveling, you're working late hours, and all of that stuff. How do you sort of go about that? What's your take on that?
So I think the first and foremost thing is, I think you should not put too much pressure on yourself. See, if you do it because you enjoy it, everything happens. What I see is, many people are like this whole work life balance. Should I do this? Should I not do this? See, if what you're working is not your life, it becomes a chore.
Yeah.
Now, for your employee, it's not fair for you to push your passion on your employee and say, please work 16 hours a day or 20 hours a day. I don't think that's the right thing to do. They have to work. An employee possibly has other things he or she wants to do. Our respect of that is very important. So I think as an entrepreneur, a recognition that the the need to do it or you're going to miss the bus is your problem. It's not necessarily the organization's problem. Uh, and I find a lot of people say, and this is a negative comment of my lack of understanding. When they tell me they are stressed, I often think to myself, why do you get stressed? Just calm down a minute and say, what is going to happen? This world has lived millions and billions of years, right? Another 5 minutes or 10 minutes is not going to make or break this world at all. So why stress? If it's not this week, it'll happen next week. I mean, I'm very target driven. I move target driven. I like driving towards targets, but it shouldn't be at the cost of your own peace of mind. Are you going to miss the bus? Yeah, oftentimes you say, oh, listen, this was an idea that I thought of, you didn't. But then that's going to be 1,000 as you go forward, right? Every year of your life, somebody else would have done that, whatever was your idea, whatever you dreamt of in the early morning hours when you're sleeping, somebody would have gone ahead and done it. So it's okay. I mean, you can always be the second or copy. Why should all of us be the ones who invent? So I think it's important for the young people to think entrepreneurially because the country has gone between being babu driven and employee driven at one hand, and the poor have always been distress survival entrepreneurs. So the survival entrepreneurs want to be babus now. So they're going through an education system and wanting to be aspirational. The middle class, which was the babu class, now wants to be entrepreneurs. So both are struggling. Both the young are struggling, and therefore I do believe. Using your words, take a chill pill, just calm. Nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. You can start in another, if it's not today, it will start in another 10 days. If it's not 10 days, it will start in another 1 year. But the important thing, I think, is to believe that it's possible. Believe that it's possible, and if it's not this route, you'll find some other route. I can tell you from my own career, right? I started off thinking I'll live in a village. Then I thought I'll be a researcher. Then I worked in a National Institute of Advanced Studies as a research assistant. Then I did my PhD. Then I thought I want to be more in the policy making. And then I decided to be an entrepreneur. So I've set up LabourNet as a social enterprise. Then I decided, no, the not for profit is there. So if you look at the last 30 years, I've probably changed 5 times. What's the big deal? But who defines us, right? At the end, if you're happy, you're happy.
So
And my measure is simple, Dhruv, be happy.
that's beautiful, ma'am. But I think when you spoke about your past and you didn't know what you're doing and this somehow clicked, right? So Steve Jobs has this moment where he's giving this speech in Stanford, if I'm not wrong, but he says that looking back, have you heard that speech? And he says, looking back, I didn't know why I took a calligraphy class, but at the end of the day, that's what created the font in the Macintosh. Can you talk about some moment? I'm sure you would have had some moment like that. Did you, or can you talk about it a little bit more?
Yeah, after I finished my postgrad in social work, I came back to Bangalore and I started training women panchayat leaders. And that I think was my sort of the decisive moment for me in terms of that I will be in this sector and this is what I will do. So it was a very strange thing, this were uh, the 73rd Amendment had come, so there was an affirmative action where there's a third reservation for women in panchayats. So my job was to go and train. So the first time I went there, it was in Sira Taluk in Karnataka. There were women who were in a school and the gates were closed for the night. I was like, why am I closed in with the gates locked? All the men are sleeping there. So I was like, what under the sun? You're like jail locking me. What is happening? Then I realized the men said, nothing is happening. We're keeping you safe. And this is the very antithesis of empowerment, right?
Yeah.
You've got to keep me locked in order for me to be safe, and you're bringing people to get trained to be empowered. It was an oxymoron moment for me. And then as I was going through my training program, I found the entire training program was a set of rules saying, please understand how to use this money, please understand how to use this decision.
When was this?
This was 1994.
Okay.
1994. So then I was like, what is this? And then I decided, let me junk this training program, the agenda and the notes which were given to me. And then I said, let's just talk. And that I think has been the driving force for me saying, don't stick to script. Learning is about experiences. Learning is about knowledge. Learning is about the thirst and the search for knowledge. And it can apply to driving, it can apply to EV service technician, it can apply to leadership. If you are going to impose learning as a almost rote learning, right? Instruction, it's never going to stay in one's mind. And that to me has been, you know, all of you hear it all the time, experiential learning, allow interactions. I don't believe uh, just being told, just reading will allow for it. I feel everyday experiences will really be the learning.
I
So
think
that's my moment.
I think a rebel without, I wouldn't say a cause, because you are technically learning and that's developing yourself and growing and all of that. But I think the next question that I want to ask is, if you could, so would you say that going forward, any entrepreneur that's looking to start out on their own thing? So there's this sort of stereotype from somebody that's not an entrepreneur but that's read and tries and wants to get into it eventually. There's this whole idea that you need to work with people that are way smarter than you, or you need to work with people that are higher up in the order than you so that they can help you climb through the ranks and all of that stuff. But would you suggest that in India, the need of the hour is upskilling while sort of building your own thing? So if I were to build like a computer company, let's say, then I could hire like people from some community and upskill them and then use them. Would you suggest that that sort of model would work, or would it be needed?
I feel India needs it. Not that kind of model will work. It's a more difficult model, no doubt about it. But India needs it. I mean, if we look at it, we have so many unemployed, right? And as I said, they are first generation. So imagine if every year 12 million first generation young people, their parents believing education will solve their problem, are going to come into this world. I do believe that, we have to look at ways in which we are able to work with them, which means if you're starting a computer company, like what Zoho did, can we have more such models? Can we think of our everyday lives like that? I think
Could you
that to
speak
me is
about what
important.
Zoho did?
So he just said, I'm going to go to this, not be in Chennai. I'm going to be closer to Tanjavur and Trichy and those areas and set up my company there. And he employs people who are 10 standard, 12 standard, and then builds it out with them, which I think is beautiful, right? And he's built a $1 billion company plus, which I think is very, very beautiful. But I think he's one. How do millions of people like you go and do it? And to me, that's the Sambhav LabourNet story I want to show. Is there a way in which we can show that for every young person there are a lot of shackles, right? Young girls, women, the question you asked me, for them it's tremendous. Household chores, child care, elderly care, boundaries of when you can go, mobility, digital, Are you allowed to use a mobile? Are you not allowed to use a mobile? Are you going to use your brother's or your husband's versus yours? How far can you travel? What times can you travel? Imagine trying to work within these circumstances with, 100. Imagine you're being tied by a rope all sides, and you say, oh, listen, now jump, start becoming. I mean, it's quite a task, right? So to me, if we bring work closer to their homes, if we bring, that means slowly, 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 we break the shackles of mobility. Break the shackles of digital access to the digital world. Let me say. Similarly, for young boys, when we look at it, uh, their problem is not inferiority to anybody else. As I said, their world age is probably much, much, much more than urban, educated young people who want to be entrepreneurs. But the problem that they have is the lack of the networking skill sets. Where are the accelerator programs for them? Where are the people who are going to spend time with them to build this out? Because these are skills you learn year on year in your education, but how do you do it to somebody like that is important.
So would you say it's like a balance of opportunity given and confidence that they have in themselves, or is one greater than the other?
Opportunity is the first, confidence can be built.
Okay.
But confidence, one has to be, in every class, in every group of people, you'll have people with different confidence levels. So cohortize them, use them to their most opportune skill sets. Everybody doesn't have the skill set, and it doesn't have to be. Some people will be outgoing, some people will be quieter. Doesn't mean the quieter ones are not are less confident. So I think it's about understanding and working with that group to make the change happen. Then the question comes is, why is that an entrepreneur's problem? That is the state's problem. It's not the entrepreneur's problem. But we live in this country.
But I think there's really a gap there if I think about it. Like there is like with a country like India with the vast number of population that we have, there is really a gap in the amount of people that are working like proper skill jobs and getting good money for it. So if I don't know if companies can really think about that. And it's obviously, like you said, it's a slower process because you will have to train them. But don't you think language is the biggest barrier over here?
It's a yes and a no. So just look at it. It's more than language, it is body language. So if you go to a construction site or a manufacturing site or a restaurant for that matter, no, you will find people from West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand happily working with a Kannadiga or a Tamilian, and they manage it very well. They managed to learn the words. They've not gone through, uh, lessons in Kannada or lessons in English, but they communicate perfectly well to manage. The problem is a class problem. It's not a language problem. Language can be surpassed. Humans know how to communicate without talking also. So there are ways to, and you learn each other's language. I think language is a very, is overblown. It's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's not critical. It's not a make or break. And you see that the poor actually don't have this problem. The poor they travel across with limited language skill sets and manage perfectly well. It is it is between the entrepreneur who comes from an urban middle class and the poor where there is a language problem. So also it is between education. Those who are educated start start having different body languages. So their whole the way they approach anybody who's their own age, who comes from a less privileged background, will be different. Will be very different. And I think that's the problem. It's a different class. So you say, oh, I believe in equality. I believe in equity. But are you behaving that? Are you living that life where you believe it is the problem?
How would you suggest somebody? So I know you had the experience where you went and worked hands-on with all of these people, but how would you suggest for somebody who is in, let's say, the middle class and they want to sort of bridge this gap? Like you said, a lot of people say that they are, but for some of us, I think we actually want to be, but we don't know how do we bridge this gap. Like, would you suggest just joining community projects, or what would you suggest for people?
So, in LabourNet, we launched this program called Capstone because of that. Because we believe that students coming from premier institutions need to have the need to have need to just engage, because the world has become, India particular has become more and more ghettoized. The rich live in their colonies and their apartments. They go to the same kind of gyms, their clubs. You don't play on the road anymore. In our time, we played on the road, right? You don't play gilli danda or whatever you call seven steps, etc. on the road. You don't play cricket on the road. You don't see any of things. The playgrounds have become ghettoized. So, if you have a large playground, the only way people from the middle class would come is through a class. You don't just have general. So we said, let's bring in Capstone. And if Capstone and the national education policy allows it, so if that can happen, we wanted to use Capstone more to bridge this gap. And I believe that that would be invaluable. Because respect for someone, understanding, and you will have a love for humanity. So I'll tell you small things which can go wrong, right? The smell of the poor. It sounds very crass when I say it, but have you ever thought, if you didn't have water for 2 days and you couldn't wash your clothes every day, how would you smell? You know, and I find these are the places where we say, okay, I can do an hour, but I can't do more. But you don't look at solving it. What's your take on solving it, right? And that's where I feel one needs to have empathy. One needs to. Nobody's asking you to be generous and kind, but put yourselves in the same shoes. When I'm saying their world age, which is what I discovered, my chronological age versus their chronological age versus the world age, is much more. We live in a cossetted societies. So how do you really take it out is important. And so to me, the answer to your question would be yes, community projects, but it needs to be anchored. It's difficult to just walk into communities. So I think, how do you anchor it? How do you do it as a program? Just like you're doing a computer class or you're doing tuition, I think every parent needs to invest in their young people in their houses, in middle class and upper middle class families, and say, please do programs like the Capstone. Spend on it. Ensure you're able to, because when you spend on it, you value that learning. You're not doing it for charity. You're not doing it for anything. It's a learning process. And you say, okay, this is a learning process they have to go through.
I'm curious to know though, do you think this change can be bought in from our parents' generation, or do you think it has to be completely like our generation making that move and taking that step?
I think it'll be a combination. If more of you come back and say, like, you want an Xbox, I know that's old fashioned now, but whatever the equivalent of the Xbox is, and say, I really want it, I really want it, I really want it, then your parents are, they have to spend on you. You determine what they spend on, sadly. So that could be one very way where you initiate it. Parents also need to have the sensitivity to say that, they're also young people. So, do they have the sensitivity to think this is necessary for my young person? In my family, my son or daughter may be working with Zomato or Zoho, a urban company. How will they succeed? Or they may be setting up the next Nika or Bombay Shaving Cream company, and therefore, how do they do it? So, the moment everybody starts thinking like that, saying, you're not doing it for charity. You're not doing it for good. You're doing it because you're selfish that your young one has to succeed in life. I think the world will change.
And I think for me also, like when I visited the center for the first time, one of the Sambhav centers, I think it was a very weirdly emotional, even I would say, because not that you feel sad, there's no sympathy or anything, but it's just beautiful to see that there's people who like aren't given the exact opportunities that we are, and sometimes we take that for granted. So I think that suggestion definitely would be great. But then again, I struggle to find how an everyday person would sort of find that. Like you said, Capstone is coming to the colleges, but then
It
otherwise,
needs to scale. That's why I'm
Yeah,
saying, that's why I said, you know, one can dream, right? Nothing wrong with it. Just imagine every person between the ages of 18 to 21 or 23 goes and tells their parents, assuming there are, I don't know, whatever, 400 major colleges across 4 cities or 5 cities of India, Delhi, Bombay, Pune, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, and say, I want to do this. Can you imagine what a revolution it would cause? It'll be like people standing for Apple to buy the new Apple phone. So revolutions can be caused in any ways, right? So
definitely.
it's like for us the structured model, and we can, if we say Capstone is our uh, is our gate to learn, it's possible. But one is the university systems pushing it, the other is parents understanding it, then the young people in their 18 to 23 years saying that, you know what, I'm not going to go away without it. I'm going to take this learning because it's important for me. The reverse is also true. We did a very similar project to the Capstone called Eco Fellows in Odisha. We took 53 young people from rural Odisha backgrounds and taught them life skills reverse, research life skills,
Oh,
Excel life skills, teaching life skills, and their confidence has become, put them in front of cameras, said you have to now take photographs, you have to talk, you have to understand qualitative, don't come back. So I think it's about both sides being there. But on this side, let's create an Apple phone. I mean, let's have Capstone in every city, probably people queuing up to say, I want to have this. Then, many organization, not-for-profits, enterprises will offer it as a as a
as
paid course.
makes sense. Would you also say that being independent, like in my case, I remember there was this time where it was during COVID and I needed a phone. Now, what a lot of us middle class kids would do is probably just go ask for our parents to buy us a phone or give us the money to buying a phone. But weirdly enough, like you spoke, I sort of lived through the same situation like how a daily wage worker or somebody would earn, and I worked a job as a Zomato delivery boy. And through that experience, I learned a lot because I obviously went through the difficulties and all of that stuff. So, would that model of learning and just sort of creating that independence where it's not like any middle class kid can just afford a good phone out of like straight out of the box. They have to ask their parents. But if you create that sort of like independence or I don't know, even ego for that matter, you might want to say that no, I will do my own thing. How would you go about instilling that in?
See, I think it's very important. As a culture, we don't have it. So it's not only the middle class in India, it's also the poor don't have that culture. We set our young people for a much longer period of time. So I think the earlier we have the culture to say that you have to contribute, it's good. One doesn't have to have child labor, but at the same time, bringing them into the world of work is very important. So world of work, the earlier people come in, it's better. It's a narrow differentiation between slave labor, child labor, and world of work. Initiation into world of work has to be early, but it shouldn't be exploitative. I think that's the only thing. But you're right. You're saying that I would, I would 100% see. I mean, I have enormous respect for what you did. Right? Is say I'm going to do it, and invest in yourself. I mean, I keep saying this to every one of our candidates in our centers also. Where is your investment in yourself? Make the money, invest in yourself. Don't say, I need it for the house, I need it for this. Because your future is going to depend, and your house's future is going to depend on your investment. So you should have the ego.
Makes sense. And I think to really wrap things up, since you've worked with so many different audiences and since you yourself are an entrepreneur, I think what would be some advice is very vague, but I'm sure you're a great speaker, so you could get some like really good information out of this. What would you give advice to somebody who's from the lower stratosphere or somebody like a daily wage earner, and then somebody who's also from like the middle class? Or the last probably segment I would like to end it with is probably the upper middle class. What could you give them advice related to entrepreneurship and building something that's greater than themselves and all of that?
See, to somebody who's a first generation learner, who, as you said, comes from a less privileged background, I would say first is spend time and build skill sets. See, the problem there is often they would like to have aspirational incomes, but they just don't have the skill sets. And for them to first recognize those skill sets is important. So I think the moment we break the shackles of this boring teaching system, no, they will make it. I see in them so much potential. So I think it's for us to do that for them and for them to grab opportunities to get out of the rut of learning. For the middle class, I would say, um, you know, uh, go the route of ego, go the route of saying I need to invest in myself. And it's a difficult thing for a young person. Do I have fun or do I sit there and learn? And because we've made learning so boring, it's a challenge. So I think they need to step out. Should you do very well in your education? 100% yes. Please don't bunk classes. Don't think formal education is not important. Formal education is critical, right? So to sort of paraphrase a film dialogue, I went all the way. There's this Pretty Woman dialogue which Richard Gere says when Julia Roberts asks him, "How much did you study?" So he says, "I went all the way," which is important for every young person in a middle class. Your parents have invested a hell of a lot in you. Don't shortchange them. Go all the way. But when you go all the way, build parallel skill sets, and that's in your hand. So, don't go to coffee day or Starbucks for one day, spend the same money or reposition what you want for that money with your parents or earn the money as you did with Zomato, etc. Earn the money too, no problem. For the upper middle class, I'd say that, just go the Apple phone route. Understand that you have to build your skill sets because you actually lack it. Because unlike the middle class, where they would have done a little bit saying they understand the problems of the parents, they've not seen extreme wealth, the upper middle class may have seen wealth. So, how do you now get off your back and say, you've got to really learn so that, and you don't take, you don't take it for granted that your wealth is going to stay with you. Your status, your wealth is your parents' status. It's not yours. I think they need to remember that the achievement is their parents, it's not theirs. So the moment, the biggest thing they have to do is stop thinking, my parent is me, my grandparent is me. It's no, you are you. You're not anybody else. And I can say that I came from an upper middle class family. It was very difficult, to uh, if I'm not my father's daughter or my mother's daughter or my grandfather's daughter, that's how you look at it, right? There are things given to you. How do you get off and say, listen, that's their identity, it's not your identity. So I think it's about um, grabbing opportunities to learn and grabbing institutional opportunities to learn. Getting out of your comfort zone is very important. uh, i I think I want to go back to the poor. They always earn while they're a lot of them are, in India, are sort of this government job fascination is there for security, which the middle class, by the way, did it the previous generations, and therefore they're doing it now. So they're just doing a full copy. They have the ability to earn. It's more pushing them towards saying that push your ability to learn there. They have to push the ability to learn. The upper middle class have to push the ability to earn. So that's what.
Makes sense. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this whole experience. It's been absolutely surreal. I've had goosebumps the entire podcast. I don't know if you guys can see that on the camera or not, but I wouldn't have had my first podcast with anyone else. This has been absolutely beautiful. And I'd like to thank you again for the whole thing. And we'll probably do another episode. Definitely, we were speaking about it before, but if we in the future, maybe if we can do something else, that would be great too. But yeah, if you'd like to tell anything before we end, then that would be good. Or if that's it, then we can call it a video.
No, I mean, this is my first time that I have a little boy who's what, 14 years old now? You're 15 years old, and I'm talking. I was just thinking, is he going to fall asleep on me? So I think my temperature check is going to be you. Uh, so I think you should do a podcast to see whether
Definitely.
he's fallen asleep or not. Then that would be my temperature check. But yeah,
For
had a
sure.
great time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dhruv.
Okay.
Thanks.
That was intense. I literally had to pull out my handkerchief at one point because of how much I was sweating. But hey guys, before you go, I've got 3 things that I want to tell you. The first thing is, if you like what Sambhav does and want to know more about them, then go ahead and check them out. I'll have them linked down in the description. They're literally changing one life at a time, and it's really beautiful and emotional and inspiring to watch. The second thing is, if you guys enjoyed this and you have any remarks or any advice of things I could have done better, from the lighting to anything at all, then please go ahead and comment down below. And also, you could suggest stuff that I could do for future podcasts, like make it funny, make it goofy, like something like fake a fart or something. I'll most likely execute it because I'm a small channel, so most of your comments will come to action. The last thing is, if you found this podcast useful, then please like and subscribe for more such podcasts and share this video to whoever it could be of use to. That's it for this podcast, guys, and until next time, bye. Get into anything, I would like to tell you a little bit about Gayatri ma'am. She has been mentioned on the Forbes list for the best social change.
Social entrepreneur.
Social entrepreneur, sorry, I'm nervous.